I'd just like to share how I met Tim Wise, and that was, I'm going to not use this. It was at a networking event, because that's actually how... It's all right, I'll just speak for 2 minutes. Because that's how I'm growing and building this business, is through networking, through face-to-face interaction with people. Met him at Ron Gibson's awesome events that he runs. He's our guest speaker in September. Awesome person who brings awesome people into the room. Tim Wise was one of those awesome people in the room. So we're at this networking event and exchanging, so we had a lot of resonance, you know, like-minded and a whole bunch of things. And he was choking on an insect. It just made it really memorable. And I was just like going, are you okay? He's like still trying to talk, but you really weren't okay. Anyway, jokes aside, it made it very memorable. But got to know Tim through a course of face-to-face one-to-one meetings and heard about all that he offers and all that he's done in business. So this is a very experienced, very wise individual. He just wants to share his knowledge with people and to assist them to do and be whatever or whoever you want to be, and through storytelling, which is, I believe, one of the most powerful forms of communication. So set your, if you're thinking this is all woo-woo or it's not really for me, then leave that out the door. For the next 60 minutes, have an open mind and listen and take in the expertise of Tim Wise. Please make him welcome.
Before we get started, I just want everyone to just close their eyes for a sec. Because we haven't got long tonight, I just want to do this slightly different. Normally I just get you to relax the different parts of your body. So I just want you to feel yourself in the chair, feel really comfortable. Feel the seat supporting you and feel your feet firmly on the ground. And just feel yourself blessed by whatever it is that is your higher power. Could be anything. Just feel it. Allow it to make you really present and here right now. It can happen right now, right in this moment. Great, thank you. Please open your eyes. So, in 2007, I travelled to Connecticut in the US. And I attended a seminar. It was a pretty radical personal development seminar. And in this seminar, we were learning about the power of story, the power of our internal stories. And we were in a 5-star hotel, and we'd been eating breakfast for the previous 2 days. You know, nice hotel, so you get things like miso soup, right? And, eggs and bacon and all those good things. And the meals were great. We turned up on the 3rd day and there was no food, just jugs of iced water on the table and these placards on the table saying, who would you be without your story? And this didn't just go on for that morning, it went on for the next 2 days, right? And so the purpose of that was to make us look at what were the stories that came up when we were put in a sort of unusual situation like that. Sometime after that, well, they didn't feed us for 2 days, gave us just jugs of ice water, and we had to inquire into what our stories were around this situation. And then they trucked us into New York, stuck us in a park, and told us we could say only 2 things. We could say, I'm hungry, will you feed me now? And we could say thank you and no. That was to say no to anyone who had offered us drugs. And I actually had to use that. So I sat down next to the first person. He was eating a big baguette. Now, you know those big monstrous ones that you see in the US. And I said, I'd never met this guy before. I sat down and said, I'm hungry, will you feed me now? And he tore off a bit of his baguette and he handed it to me. I then went and sat next to another guy who was eating curry. same thing. This was one of the most extraordinary and profound experiences of my life, where I got to see that without a story, I was very powerful. I could actually get whatever I wanted without a negative story, that I shouldn't be doing this, that I can't be doing this, that this is going to be embarrassing. So that was my first insight into the power of story. It was about 5 years later that I discovered how stories can be powerful in business, how we can communicate our external stories in a way that engages and inspires people and influences people. And what I'm going to share with you today is how that works. You'll see up there a picture of the tap doctor. In 1994, I turned up to my then business partner's place. He wasn't my business partner yet. I just was meeting him for the first time through an introduction from my brother, a guy named Archie Gubbins, right? He was this typical plumber. He was from Barwon Heads in New South Wales. In Victoria. Has anyone been there? Anyone know Barwon Heads? Yeah. And he was this surfy guy. He was in these blue overalls. They had paint and crap and silicone all over him. He was standing there and he was in his kitchen. And inside the pantry in his kitchen, he showed me this cake tin, lifted up the cake tin. There's all this cash stuffed inside this cake tin. And I said, what the hell is going on here? He said, this is the tap doctor. You know, I've got these little black cars, or little black cars at the time. Does anyone remember the black cars of the tap doctor? Anyway, little Honda Civics, turbocharged. They were running all around Perth. He was literally blowing up turbochargers and engines. And his family was beside him. So he had 4 kids, and you could just see and feel the stress in the family. And I just read a book called The E-Myth. Who's read The E-Myth? Great, yeah. Awesome business book. If you haven't read it, I suggest you check it out. What the E-Myth talks about is how to proprietise a business. So how to take a business that is basically a technician, like Archie was, running around doing everything, how to systemise it, how to make it, give it a look and a feel. So that's what we ended up with the Tap Doctor. And that was 20 years ago. And now it's Australia's biggest plumbing maintenance franchise business. The other image there is of Wise Winery. I'm from the Wise family. That's my father's winery. And I was presenting at Family Business Australia last week. And the context was obviously family business. And I told them how I had shared with my father how I thought a new business that he was setting up on the winery was going to be a disaster, and he was going to lose X thousands of dollars in the first year. And he'd respectfully emailed back to me saying, yeah, you might be right, but I'm going to do it anyway, and this and this and this. And I got another email a few days later saying, I just woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I had these thoughts, but I don't think it's a good idea to send them to you now, so we'll talk about it later, and all this sort of thing. And, you know, the family business for me has been, you know, a struggle in that way, and on the relationship side of things, because I always wanted to go and do my own thing. I always wanted to make my own mark. So Wise Winery is part of our family. We make great wine. Where's the frog? Where's the jumping frog? It's hump day. Where's the bonking frog? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's all good. Try the Wise wine someday. So today we're going to be, before we get started, what is it? What do you think of when I say I'm going to tell a story? Give me some feedback about what you think if I say I'm going to tell a story. Nathan. Life experiences, yep, thank you. Yep.
Once upon a time.
Yeah. Structure, once upon a time. Anything else? Yep.
Feelings. The story we want Calvin to get impact from us.
Yeah, okay.
To reinforce what development.
Yep. All right. What about some of the negative connotations with story?
It's fluffy.
Yeah, fluffy, dishonest, too personal, great, yep, vulnerability. Boring, yep, here we go. What's he going to sell now? You know, all this sort of stuff, okay? So, you know, story does have some negative connotation. And that is something that we'll share later on, one of the tips is never use the S word when you're about to tell a story. Find another segue into your story for those reasons. So today we're going to be talking about stories, how they can help influence, how they create great connection. That's one of the things that we're really going to focus on today. And you're going to get to discover your connection story, okay? You have lots of connection stories. You'll get to discover at least one today. Why stories are so powerful is because they're concrete. We're going to learn about that, and we're going to learn about why stories are also memorable. So the way that we use, the purpose of stories is to clarify purpose, embed values, inspire action, and reveal the truth, and sometimes to dissolve resistance. We can use stories in all these different ways. In a study, they found that when they went to a telemarketing outfit, studying the way that the telemarketers operated, when they were just doing the telemarketing to put money in the bank of the charity that they were raising money for was one thing. The second group that they studied were actually were told the benefits of them being a telemarketer. So for example, if someone was a telemarketer, how it was good for their own personal development, how it might help them make money, etc. And the third group was told was told the story about how the charity that they were raising money for really helped those individuals. And then they studied the results, okay? And what they found was that the third group far outperformed the other two groups that were acting in their own self-interest, okay? So stories, when we're told a story that helps motivate us and gives us the reasons behind what we're doing, it definitely leads to better outcomes and better purpose. It helps embed values. At the Ritz-Carlton, they get the bellboys out 3 times a week out on the floor to share stories about how they've gone over and above in customer service. One of the values at Ritz-Carlton, the most important value, is that of customer service. And so John, the bellboy, will share how he's helped Mr. Smith on the 3rd floor who can't get his key card into the door. He's taken it downstairs, got it remagnetised, brought it back and helped him get in his room, and later received a letter about how much that was appreciated. And they're given a reward of $100 for the best stories every week. And what that helps do, rather than having placards up around the Ritz-Carlton or in the training rooms that we value customer service and, you know, you should help the customer, that's the most important thing. By sharing stories which are concrete, it helps the other people in the room and the other bellboys take action, and they're always trying to outdo the others with a better story, and which comes from something that they've done to go over and above. Stories inspire action, as we've heard before, but also, you know, that's a good example that we've previously shared. Stories can help us reveal the truth, okay? We worked with the armed forces. We had one group which went out and collected stories in the conventional way, and another group which went out and collected stories so when I say the conventional way, through a survey. So just asked a set of linear questions. And then we went out and collected stories. When the two groups got back together, when I say we, this is a company anecdote that I work with, when the two groups got back together, the group that had collected the stories compared with the ones that were collected in the survey group came back and said, everything seems pretty good here. Yeah, there's a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, occupational health and safety in the Australian Armed Forces at this barrack seems pretty good. And the story group, the group that had collected people's stories, said, so you didn't hear about the bloke down in the workshop where everyone's wearing steel cap boots, but no, because some poor fellow lost his foot a couple of weeks ago, but no one's wearing safety glasses because no one's lost their eye yet. So stories help us reveal the truth about certain situations, whereas a linear survey just doesn't reveal that level of information. It helps us dissolve resistance. Stories are very much a pull strategy. And often we have a bias. When we believe in a particular opinion and someone tries to change our opinion, what do? We tend to push back, right? So stories basically help us sell a new vision, and once someone makes that their vision, they take a sense of ownership, and that's why we call it a pull strategy, not a push strategy. There are a bunch of different types of stories. We have connection stories, success stories, anti-stories, influence stories, clarity stories, story listening, story triggering, storytelling. So we haven't got time to deal with all of that tonight, so we'll be dealing mainly with the connection stories and also with helping you understand how to spot and tell a story. So good stories capture the moment. Dee gave us a great example when she came up here earlier tonight and told the story of how she first met Fleur, right? The power in that was actually sharing a moment in time, okay? So a story, and this is, if you take nothing else away tonight, please take away these aspects of understanding what a story is, because when you understand this, it will allow you to capture moments of time. Because one of the things that I see that is probably the most problematic when people tell stories, and I say problematic, that's probably not the right wording, it's more just you can be much more effective in your storytelling when you focus in on a specific moment in time rather than making a chronological account of events or, you know, too broad in its perspective. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to narrow in, like just go right into a moment in time, okay? And that's what Dee did really well. She went back to the time when she met Fleur and she told an account of what happened there. So, you know, it's a sense of place as well. I often encourage my clients to tell everything as a story. So in a 24-hour period, how many things could you actually tell as a story? And I was thinking about this tonight as I was reflecting how some of the stories that I would share. And I was thinking just this afternoon, I was thinking what's happened in the last, just say 6 hours that I could tell as a story. And my son asked me to pick him up from school this afternoon because I've been working a lot lately, and he's actually, you know, he sort of said, you know, Dad, you don't care anymore, you know, when you work hard, you know, you sort of forget about me. So it's kind of like tearing at the old heartstrings. And I said, all right, mate, well, I'll pick you up this afternoon. I won't, he's now at home till 10 o'clock by himself because his mum's, you know, down south at the moment. But, you know, I picked him up from school and I drove him to the beach because he's a very avid surfer. And as we were driving down there, I brought him some food, but we reached the beach and he was still hungry, right? So we turned around and went back all the way from Scarborough Beach Road and back up to the IGA. And as we were stopped at the lights, just about to pull into the IGA, there was a woman who walked across the road and she had a Zimmer frame, right? And she had a younger man in front of her who walked in front of her and then waited for her in the middle, in the medium strip while she caught up. And then she caught up and they took off again together. And then when we pulled into the IGA, I saw her sitting outside Brumbies and she was crying. She didn't look well. She didn't look healthy at all. And I said to Charlie, I said, you know, that woman, she's pretty upset. She's crying. And she was there. And I just sort of thought in that moment, how many people are crying right now? You know, how many people want to cry right now? You know? And it was just an interesting, I relay that story. You'll see why I'm relaying that story in a minute. But the point I want to make is, how could you tell something that's happened in the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 hours as a story? And I'm going to show you how that's relevant, because in that story there was a time, right? It was this afternoon when I picked Charlie up from school. There was a place, okay? The place was Scarborough and the IGA, okay? And there was a series of things that happened. This happened, that happened, and that happened, okay? And I want to demonstrate just how simple storytelling can be, because it does not have to be, and this is what scares people from storytelling sometimes, is it doesn't have to be a big epic adventure. It can be as simple as something as you saw driving down the street with your kid, or any situation whatsoever. It could be something that happened at work today. It could be something, it could just be your drive to work. You know, I got up, I brushed my teeth, and so what I encourage people to do is use any bit of information, put it into a story formula, and that then creates a lot of practice. You can have a lot more practice that way. So this happened, that happened, that happened. Do you see how that took place in the storytelling? There's often dialogue, you know, like, I said to Charlie, look, that lady's crying, I wonder if she's okay. And she said, he said, is he really crying down? I said, yeah, she was. She was crying before. By that stage, her hand was just down in her head. And stories have characters, right? Stories have people in them that are important, and there's often a element of surprise as well, okay? So the element of surprise could be in that story that the lady was there and she was crying. It was certainly, it just captured me as something that was very, it had an emotional moment in it. In business storytelling, we have a business point. We always want to make a business point, okay? So that's what actually defines a business story. So the business point is a very important thing, and we'll come back to that. So this is how your formula looks. There's a time, there's a place. This happened, that happened, that happened. There's often some dialogue, and there's a business point that comes out of it. Okay. So what I've discovered is that everyone carries, as we said before, everyone carries an internal story. Everyone has a story about themselves, and everyone has a story about everyone around them. And who's heard of Jungian archetypes? Yeah, great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see just how we all have a story, okay? So Jungian archetypes are, there's 4 of them essentially, okay? There's king, warrior, lover, and magician, okay? And I just want to speak a little bit about each of them. And when I say king, it's king or queen, okay? So king or queen. So are you a king or a queen? Are you someone who's really got a balance of all the different archetypes, the warrior, the lover, the magician? Are you someone who has leadership qualities? Do people tend to follow you? Can you shift from being very straight as an arrow to very loving, to being very circumspect and thinking about things very deeply? Do you encompass all those different archetypes? If so, you're a king or a queen style of archetype. Just before I go on, I just want to say this is not who you are. This is just a primary archetype, something that you identify with most strongly, okay? So please don't think that this is all you are. You have all of these archetypes contained within you. However, for the purpose of this exercise, we want to see how you're perceiving yourself and how others are perceiving you. Are you a warrior? Are you like a ready, fire, aim sort of person, right? Sometimes you can see it in people's facial features, right? You look at this guy here, and he's not taking any shit, is he? Like, he's just like, he's as straight as an arrow, and it's real fire element, straight up and down, There's a great scene. Has anyone seen the movie Dances with Wolves? Yes. Yeah. So there's a great scene where the warrior in that movie, because that's a great archetype movie, okay? You've got the chief, who's the king. You've got the magician, who's the, what was his name? Can you visualise the guy? I can't remember his name, but it'll come to me. And then you've got this warrior who, at the end of the movie, when Dances with Wolves is moving on and he's having to leave the tribe at the end, he gets up to the top of the mountain and he shouts in Lakota, "My name is Dances with Wolves will always be my friend. He will always be my friend." And he's up there and he's screaming this at the top of his voice. And at the beginning of the movie, he was the one that was most suspect of Dances with Wolves, was very angry about him coming into the tribe. Once you win a warrior's trust, they tend to be the most fiercely loyal of archetypes. The lover archetype, you can also often see this in people's facial features. It's the more rounded sort of facial features. It's people who need to process things, they need to talk things over. They often want to keep everybody happy. Again, this is just a predominant archetype, and I just want you to intuit into this. I don't want you to intellectualize it too much. And then the magician. The magician, there's often more to them than meets the eye. Does everyone know someone like this, a magician? Some of you are probably like this yourself. Often very few words, not much to say, but when they speak, it has great weight. So I want you to discuss, I want you to pair up and decide which archetype you are, okay? And I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that. And don't think about it too much, and you can maybe ask your partner what they think you are. Alrighty. Okay. Thank you. Now. Alright, thank you. So we've got 4 corners of the room, okay? There's the king corner, there's the warrior corner, there's the lover, and there's the magician, okay? King, all the kings go here, all the warriors go here, all the lovers go here, and all the magicians there. King, warrior, lover, magician. Now, okay, as you look around the room, just quiet please. As you look around the room, is there anyone who you think should not be in the corner that they are standing in, and where would you send them?
Can you remind us of the corners again?
This is quite, we haven't got a lot of time, so this just needs to be done quickly, but just intuitively.
Yeah, the blokes in the middle. They should be standing somewhere.
Oh yeah, okay, you go over there, Brett, and you, king, that's king, that's warrior, that's, yeah, sorry, I would have you over there, sorry Brett, and probably you over there, sir, and you could probably stand here too. So, yeah, alright, so anyway, so basically, lovers, what are your judgments around the warriors? Yep.
Intimidating.
Scary, yep. Bit crazy. Yep. Warriors, what are your judgments about the lovers?
Too soft.
Too soft, yeah. And kings, what do you think? Kings and queens, what do you think about all this?
Have the heads off. They're all quite nice.
Yeah.
To the gallows.
We resonate with all
Okay. All right. They're acknowledging everyone. Magicians, what have you got to say about all this? Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you. Okay. So there's lots of levels that we can use that exercise for, okay? It's basically, it could be used for our own awareness of where our strongest archetypes are, and maybe some of the areas that we might need to build up. But for the purpose of this exercise, this is really about understanding what your story is and to see that you've got a story about everybody else. So when you're relating to a lover, you're going to be seeing them in a particular way. You're going to want to communicate and tell your stories in a particular way. and similarly with a magician or a king, okay? Everyone has a story about everything, and that's just really the tip of the iceberg. We are a myriad of stories, okay? It's a crowd in there. It's actually a crowd of stories about everything in our life. So now we're going to learn about connection stories, okay? So one of the things that Fleur's been focusing on tonight is how do we convert? Like how do we go from the relationship to actually converting? Well, the first thing that has to happen is we need to create rapport, we need to create connection with the people we're talking with. And there's a really good way to do that with story. So we've already learnt the formula for telling a story. Can someone tell me what the first element of telling a story is? Time, great. What's the second element?
Place.
Great. What's the third element?
This happened, that happened.
Excellent. And then what's another element that a story can often contain? Dialogue. Excellent. And when we're telling business stories, what do we want to have? Business point. Excellent. So the point here around this particular story is that when we know the formula, we can spot stories and we can tell stories. The ability to spot stories is really powerful because as soon as we hear someone talking about this happened in this place, excuse the spit, when this happened in this place, we know we're about to hear a story, okay? And so we get tuned into that. Does anyone know what the reticular activating system in the brain is, right? So we hear about it in the context of goal setting. It's like a mate of mine, he drives a yellow Toyota four-wheel drive, and everywhere where there's a yellow Toyota four-wheel drive, he'll see it, right? Okay? And it's like whatever car we drive, we tend to see that car. It's the same with when we start to understand what a story framework looks like, okay? As soon as we tap into that, we know we're hearing a story, and that's very good. It can also drive you a little bit nuts, just want to give you the warning, but it's very good because you can start to listen for great storytellers and learn how to tell a great story yourself. With our connection stories, it's quite a simple framework. We want to basically show that we're like the other people in our stories, and we also want to share something unique about ourselves or our family, right? So, when I got up here, I shared something about how I got in. The context is storytelling, so I shared a little bit about my connection story was about how I got into storytelling, right? That was my connection story. Now, if I had have stood up here and said, my name's Tim, I'm a really interesting guy, actually. I travel the world. A few years ago, I travelled to the States, actually, Connecticut, and then I went to New York, and then I learnt a lot about stories. I've started a couple of really good businesses, the Tap Doctor, and my family owns Wise Winery, and that's pretty cool. And if I started going on like that, what would you think, right? What? Boring. Yeah, wanker. I was delivering this program to a company yesterday, and the word they came up with was tool. So we put that up on the board. So this is where stories really help, I guess, ingratiate yourself to people, and you can tell them about who you are without sounding like you're big noting yourself, okay? And also, this is, as I said before, the stories that we're learning about today or tonight are concrete, okay? Whereas, how often do we hear CEOs and business people stand up, and if you go to any website, I guarantee if you look at the corporate video, it will be a chronological account of what that company is doing, okay? In fact, I've never really seen a video that, and I need to update mine, by the way, I've never really seen a video which does this justice, where someone has gone out and told us a story. Like it could be, like say I was talking to Ed before, and he might talk about how he had a client that he helped specifically in a time and place in this way. This happened. We took his his website. We turned it into something fantastic, and now his conversion's gone from 50% to 70%, right? That is concrete. That happened. No one's going to argue with that, all right? And that's where these connection stories can be very powerful, because they are concrete. They're yours. You own them. So these are the story triggers. To get stories, we want to ask questions that trigger stories. Those questions tend to be where and when questions, okay? This is probably going to make me a liar, these questions. But there can be other questions as well. But typically, if you want to trigger a story, you want to ask when and where questions, all right? So what I want you to do on your sheet of paper is I want you to find a connection story from these story triggering questions. Where you grew up as a kid, as a teenager. Now, these don't have to be business stories. Connection stories don't have to be business stories. I was with, the group I was with yesterday was a big resources company here in Perth, and we did this exercise, and I was leaving the building, and the CEO of the company saw me out, and he said, Tim, I've spent 10 years with these guys, and I hadn't heard some of the stories that they got up and shared today, right? So this is how powerful this is that these questions go right to the heart of who we are. So where you grew up as a kid, and I guess what the takeaway from that is that when you're vulnerable, someone raised the point before about vulnerability, the stories are vulnerable, and they are, because you're actually sharing a moment in time. You're not being generic. You're not being abstract, okay? You're going into a moment in time. So that's why it's powerful, and that's why it helps people connect. There was this one guy, this Malaysian guy, and he everyone thought he was as straight as a die. But he shared the story of how when he first came to Perth, he went to a particular, first he went to a university in KL. He was a foreign student. He went to KL and he was gambling, smoking and drinking. And everyone they were just like, the jaws just dropped. And they were absolutely, he'd revealed a part of himself, and all of a sudden the connection to him, he was much more real to them, because all of a sudden he wasn't this, this clean-cut, saintly, young Malaysian kid that had no grubby little dirty bits like we all do, right? So where you grew up as a kid, events that influenced you early in your career, what do you geek out on? I really like this question. Has everyone got something they geek out on? Yep, great, awesome. Best and worst moments, and keywords: near miss, learning, love, disappointment, success, changing jobs, all right? So what I want you to do, without thinking about it too much, just write a story with those triggering questions. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that.
All of them. Not with all
Just one. Just choose one that just jumps out at you, right? Yeah. Now, when you're writing your stories, you don't have to write it out in full. Okay? You can just write some. You can just write some key words. All right. So it could be, computers, but try and make it a moment in time. Computers. But when I bought my first Mac, girl came up to me and showed me all the features. I pulled my wallet out of it. Whatever it is, right? Good. Let's go. Yes.
Just for clarification, what
Mm.
do you mean by what you
Geek out on, yeah. So, when you just lose sense of time, when you could just do that forever, and you just, something you love, something you really are passionate about. Yeah.
See, I
Bookkeeping.
actually originally thought it was the opposite. It was just like geek out on is like have no clue about it.
Yeah, right. No. Quite the opposite. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Please do this. This is a really powerful exercise, so don't waste the opportunity. Not necessarily. You can put a business point in there if you want, but I just want you to, this is more about getting into the recesses of your mind, because what we find is a lot of people have problems finding a moment in time. Like a lot of us, and myself included, are not natural storytellers, okay? There are some people who are. Who's a natural storyteller? Yeah. Oh, so quite a lot in this room. That's great. So what this is about is actually really fine-tuning your ability to tell stories. Ed, have you got a story?
I've got a story.
Yeah, great. Do you want to get on the blocks and just share it with us quickly? Yep.
Go Ed, go Ed.
Hello everyone.
Hello Ed.
The first thing that came into my mind was growing up as a kid. I grew up in a suburb called Vivash, which is near Midland. Some of you may know. And I grew up basically on the river. So I had a very Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer sort of life growing up. My mates and I used to swim in the river, and we would get the inner tubes of truck tyres, and we'd grab the hold of the side of the Sandalford River Cruise boat and get towed up and down the river, and the captain would always come down throwing things at us, "Get off, you little bastards," you know. And we had a great time, and we didn't really appreciate it until now, looking back at how free we were compared to a lot of kids these days. So we had a fantastic free lifestyle. We got up to a lot of mischief as well, and I often tell these stories to my daughter, and she's like, "Oh Dad, tell us that story again. You said when you were a kid and you did this." So yeah, so
Brilliant. Thanks, Ed. Give Ed a round of applause. So what I really liked about what Ed did there, he said we had a bit of a huckleberry sort of an existence, right? And so that we call these sort of place markers, okay? We don't have to go into a huge description. We can just take these generic pieces, and all of a sudden people generically know what we're talking about. We use that a lot in business storytelling. And was everyone sort of transported there, hanging onto the boats and that? Yeah. Who else wants to share their story?
I'll share one.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, go do. Yeah.
So, have you ever had one of those moments where someone's challenged you and you go, "I'm going to absolutely wipe you clean"? So, in about 2009, I went to Melbourne with our best friends. We went to the footy, and we'd come back to an apartment, and we're sitting there, and I'm looking over at my mate who's laying back on the couch with this book, and he's writing all this stuff, and "What the heck are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm doing this Sudoku." And I'm going, "What's a Sudoku?" And he goes, "Oh, it's this Japanese number game thing." And he goes, "Yeah, guys are really good at it because we're good with numbers. You girls, you're better at crossword puzzles." And I'm like, "Do you really think that is true? Give me that thing. Let me have a look." So I'm doing this thing, and I've gone, "Yeah, what's so hard about that?" From then on, I was totally hooked on Sudokus.
Round of applause. So that really had everything, didn't it? You know, it had in 2009 at the apartment, and challenged to do this. There was some dialogue, there was some back and forth, there was a real element of surprise, right? The thing that, how about this? And then there was the business point of, you know, ever since you've been hooked on Sudoku, and yeah, and it had that resistance there, didn't it? "I'll show you, you bastard," kind of thing. So let's have one more sharing. Monique.
Yeah, we'll show you a story. Back in 1992 in Namibia, and I was an illegal immigrant. I came from Zambia. I had no passport, no visa, no entry. And there's a place called Katimamulilo, which is like the end of Namibia. It's like a strip between Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. So we're driving, and then what happened was that we came to a roadblock, and I didn't expect a roadblock. And I was sitting in front with the driver, with a Nissan Pathfinder. Hell, it's the end of me. And that was what have been even worse if they arrested me. I would have been in there for forever. So, and there were so many people in the car, at the back, the front, and there's a roadblock here, and the guy said, "Everybody get out, your IDs, your passports, your visas," and I have nothing. So, and what I did, a fake weed saved my life. I was dry. I haven't drank the whole day. I have no water. I have nothing. And when everybody got out, they all had their passport and their visa. They all got on the queue. There's only one guy that brought. I just got in the queue and they just said, "Here." And I just went. There was a bush on the side, so I just went there pretending to be doing stuff. Yeah. So I just carry on and I'm watching behind me like what's happening there. And the guy's right here and the guys are queuing over there and the coach right here and I'm like, carry on. And luckily, I was just trying to be clever and just avoid the whole situation. If I get in the queue, it's like next. Obviously, it will come to me. So I didn't want to get in the queue at all. So when I pretended to finish my business, I went behind the car, walked around, went to the driver's seat, and I started the story with him, how it go, blah, 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 and put my arms around, pretending that I know him and that sort of stuff. And then the queue got finished and the guy says,
Yes.
let's go.
Thank you. So, thank you, Malik. So that's your connection story. So you always want to have a connection story when you first start. When you get up, you can use this in speaking, you can use it if you're facilitating, but you can also use it in sales. I was with a group the other day and they refer to business development, and I kind of call that bull dust, right? It's just the word you want to use when you don't want to use sales, right? So sales, who's uncomfortable with the word sales? Anyone? No one. Okay, good. Yeah, some people are. I mean, some of us are still kind of not 100% with it, but it's, it's something I think we all, as Fleur was saying, we all need to get comfortable with sales, because without sales, nothing happens. Are there any questions around your connection stories? Has everyone got a connection story now? Yep, you've all got a connection story? Excellent. Who's got a connection story which is a business story with a business point? Yeah, would you like to share that quickly? Yeah.
Personal that goes into business?
Yeah, we need to keep it short though. It just needs to be, is it just short? Okay, so it's a good time to share this, is that one of the things about a business story is they should be short, no more than 2 or 3 minutes, okay? I was running a seminar one time, he said, one of the guys there, a guy named John, put up his hand and said, well, I'm going to have to cut mine down from 33 minutes. And I actually know John, and I can tell you that was no exaggeration, right? He found a way to go on and on and on. And that's kind of the thing that's given stories a bad name. But in business storytelling, you want to get to the point real quick. And you may even want to make your point up front, You may want to say, this is a story about the importance of conversion, and tell that story. Who's got a short and sharp business story? Brett. Yep, really. So I want you to, using the elements of what we've learnt tonight?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, come up the front, mate.
This is just a short story that tells when I realised that I didn't want to work for somebody, that I wanted to work for myself. And I had an interview, it was probably going back about the late 90s. I had an interview with a prominent real estate agent, and he wasn't quite sure what sort of worker he wanted, and he interviewed me and he said, look, I'm not sure what I want, you're not quite sure what you want, how about you write out exactly what you want to do, what you want to be paid and how you want to structure your day and all the rest of it, and come back to me. That sounded okay. So I did that, I wrote that out to him, I sent it in to him, I went back another interview and said, look, that sounds pretty much aligned with what I want. Other than this and this, I think you can come and work for me. And I said, look, that's all right, I'll think it over. And 48 hours later, I didn't take the job that I'd actually just written out exactly what I want. And at that moment, it was very clear to me that I didn't want to work for somebody. And it was actually the element of not working for somebody is the thing that made me not take the job. I wanted to go and work for myself. And that was really, sort of like a pivotal moment for me in overall business.
Great, thank you, Brett. Awesome. So, great story again with all the elements. So, with your story, what's the most important thing about the story for you? And what do you think this story infers about you? Okay? I want you to ask those questions of yourself. All right? So, there's a few do's and don'ts in storytelling. As we've said before, you don't want to use the S word, okay? Don't get up and say, when I say get up, or this is not just about speaking, of course. This is about sitting down, like Fleur gave the example of sitting in a coffee shop and having a conversation. Don't say, I want to tell you a story, because you will evoke all those negative connotations that go together with telling a story. Find another way to segue into your story, okay? And one of the keys to doing that is by using the time, place markers, okay? So actually what, as we've heard a few times, I was in Melbourne in an apartment or whatever, whatever the time and place markers are, they're great ways to segue in. Don't make them too long. We've just dealt with that. Don't use a storytelling voice, okay? Don't use a voice as if you're putting your kids to bed, okay? Who's seen people do this when they tell stories, right? Their voice changes, and this is not effective in business storytelling. I've put down here, don't write them out in full, right? Don't write them out in full, because when you write them out in full and you try and tell them as you've written it, it's going to lack authenticity, okay? Your stories are going to be a little bit different every time. Stories are very, very visual, which is why they're so memorable. Because they're visual, the reason that they're memorable is they actually use more neuro pathways in the brain than when we're listening to something abstract. An opinion or a bullet point or something is usually abstract, whereas stories are very visual. They evoke a lot of different neuro pathways in the brain. Do focus in the moment and time. If there's one thing you want to take away, it's about focusing on the moment in time. It was really interesting with the stories, tonight and listening, because as I said, you become attuned to this now. And Dee, and this is not anything disparaging on any of the other speakers, but Dee was the one speaker who actually focused in on a moment in time. Okay, and for that reason, it becomes much more engaging. So this is about really just learning that tonight. Do use generic place markers. We saw a great example from Ed doing that, Huckleberry Finn moment, and do have a business point. Okay, a business story without a business point is not a business story. So stories, as we've seen, can be very influential. They create great connection because you're sharing, you're being vulnerable, you're sharing a part of yourself, something concrete from your life, and they're memorable because you're taking people on a visual journey which involves them. It's context wrapped in emotion, okay? And that's why stories are so memorable. So what are the next steps? You want to try and capture your stories. This is really important because stories will fall through the cracks if you don't capture them, all right? One of the best ways to do that is with Evernote or have a little black book, but make sure you've always got a way of capturing your stories. And as we highlighted tonight, stories can appear in the most unusual places and times. When you tune into where stories can be and where they can be hidden, you'll be really surprised. Get feedback on your stories. You might have a story buddy that you tell your story to. They can give you feedback on it. They can say, maybe you could try tweaking this. The more you practice your stories, the better they'll become. And the last way is to fast track your storytelling success. Does anyone mind if I just take a few moments to tell you a little bit how you can spend more time with me? Is that all right? Great, thank you. So this is the program that I run. It's a one-day workshop called Storytelling for Leaders, okay? And it's basically about helping you acquire a big repertoire of stories and also all the different frameworks. As we spoke about before, we've got so many different story frameworks. Clarity stories. Clarity stories are one of my favourite. They're about the strategic, the big overarching stories, and very, very powerful way to get a strategic message through your organisation. In this one-day workshop, we cover all these elements. Learn why storytelling's so versatile. We'll talk about the uncanny valley, the 3 dimensions of story work. After morning tea, we deal with connection stories in much more detail, spotting stories, how to influence using stories, and anti-stories. Always in organisations we have anti-stories, and we look at ways of overcoming those with better stories. Clarity stories, as I've mentioned before, one of the most powerful things in this course, story triggering, and how we tell and use success stories. And then there's more in the afternoon. They're really bringing it all together and helping you go away with a really with a plan that you can use. And with this booklet, which comes as part of this this program, you've got a very, very powerful tool to do it yourself. So I had a client. She basically used this some of these storytelling frameworks to write to a client. She's in philanthropy, and she goes after big, high net worth clients, right? And it's $10,000 a month she won a client by using these techniques in her proposal. When she sent me her first proposal, I said, where are all the stories? There were no stories in there. And this woman had worked with some very, very powerful people, and we were able to say that in the stories without her sounding like she was big noting herself, right? And it was very, very powerful. So the price of this program for the workshop is $1,497 for the day workshop. You know, I guess you've got to ask yourself, how much is it costing you to not know some of these storytelling frameworks? The clarity story as well I used to actually get meetings with the Premier, Colin Barnett, and Troy Buswell over the shark issue. Very, very powerful tools. The bonus that comes is, of course, the 65-page workbook, and you can see it's it's got everything you need to actually make your stories come to life, and it's a resource that you can keep on an ongoing basis and refer to. And on top of that, you get a 6-month deliberate practice program where you'll get ways of practicing your storytelling on an ongoing basis, and that happens over 6 months in the form of email. So altogether, the real value is $1,497 for the workshop, $497 for the book, and $997 for the 6-month deliberate practice program. Total value of $2,991. You know, today I want to reward action. Your fellow out of the boxes. If you get up here and do a sale or a pitch to me, you know, I like to think that I'm getting value from it as well. And you know, hopefully you'll tell others once you experience how amazing this course is. So today the price is $997, or 3 payments of $350, and and you can Fleur will have order forms. I'll have order forms if you want to take advantage of that. Sorry. Oh crikey! What happened there?
You got a story about that?
Yeah, that's called a fuck up. All right. So I just want to leave you with a quote by Sun Bear, great Lakota medicine man. He said, "Don't give me no philosophy that don't grow no corn. Don't give me no philosophy that don't grow no corn." So thank you. Please connect with me on social media, and I want to thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
What's the June date? It's not going to work. There was a June date and a June date in the 3rd week of June, yes, and an August date in the 1st week of August. If you want to know dates, Tim does know the dates. So you can ask Tim for those dates, but just awesome opportunity. I don't think there's anything else I need to add to that. I think Tim speaks for himself. So jump on board. It'd be nice to get a whole crowd of our boxers along on one or both of those dates. So ask me any questions you might have, but approach Tim so he can demonstrate of how this might work for you in your personal situation in business. And he's more than happy to spend time with you individually, just having a quick chat. So yeah, thanks very much. If anyone's got any questions about membership, I'm available. I'm also available to answer questions for Tim's course as well. And our next event is the 8th of July. We have 2 parties a year, which is our meeting. We have a keynote speaker, and our keynote speaker is Brett Easton, fellow, our Box Biz thinker. He is sharing his adventures from Antarctica. Very, very cool stuff. So, network, put 8th of July in your diary and hang out, there's more wine, and that's it.
Thank you.